So with May being over and we head into June, let's talk about some movies that I irresponsibly spent money on. I didn't get a whole lot in May. I did order some stuff that's still not here, so that will be a part of June's update. But one of the newer things I got was Bloodshot. Now this was a movie that came out in theaters right around the beginning of the whole COVID nonsense, and it was a movie I was really looking forward to that I didn't get to see in theaters before they shut down, and I'm really glad I went ahead and got it. It's pretty decent. It's not like super amazing, but it's pretty fun. I love Vin Diesel because he's really invested in these like really sci-fi fantasy action films, and he's a pretty good action star. He's not the best at dialogue or emoting, but much like Keanu Reeves, he handles action scenes pretty well. And Bloodshot has some really fun action set pieces. One of my favorite scenes of, I would almost say one of my top scenes of the year is the tunnel scene where it's all in red. It's in the trailer where everything's just drenched in red. That whole scene in this film is phenomenal. Hands down the best part of the whole entire movie. The problem really with this is the story. The story is super weak. Very easy to foresee what's going to happen. And there's some moments of some really bad CGI. Overall though, Bloodshot is pretty fun. I would recommend giving it a watch. I'd say it's like a 6 or 6.5 out of 10, but there are a few scenes in this film that is great. I finally picked up Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the latest from Quentin Tarantino, and it's pretty great. I mean, it's Quentin Tarantino with Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. It's gonna be a good time, and it is. I've waited for a while to pick this one up because I really am not the hugest fan of the box art for this one. I know that's like kind of a strange reason to pick it up, but I was kind of like, I'll wait till like Black Friday-ish, and then it dropped in price to $14.99, and I thought, I'll go ahead and pick it up, and then like 2 days later dropped to $9.99, so I probably should have just waited even longer, but it is a good film. It's weird to say that because it is, I think, in my opinion, one of my least favorite Tarantino films, which may be blasphemy to say at this point, but it is kind of one of my least favorite Tarantino's, but I still really love this film. He's just a filmmaker that I really admire his whole career pretty much, and honestly, this might be one of my favorite performances by Brad Pitt of all time. His performance in this film was amazing. Leonardo DiCaprio was great as well and plays this character really, really well, but there was something about Brad Pitt's character that really interested me more than anything else going on in the film. To me though, with Tarantino, you know, he's been stretching these movies out to be like these like 2.5, 3 hour films, and there's rarely ever time that I think back with watching those films that there's a lot of fat on this one. But I kind of feel that way with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I definitely feel like you could probably trim this movie down and it'd be a better paced movie, but it's still a really, really good movie that I'd give like an 8 or an 8.5 to. I just think it's one of Tarantino's weaker films, but that doesn't mean it's still not a great film. A film from 2019 that I've had my eye on for a little while is Light of My Life. I ended up picking this up with a Walmart gift card that I got, and I was like, alright, what do I order with this? I figured I'd just order some movies that I want, but for some reason don't want to spend my money on. And honestly, I really enjoyed this one. Basically, it's kind of the same story plot as like something like Children of Men, but told at a very more subtle and slower pace. Casey Affleck I really like as an actor. He's been in some really good stuff here recently, and this time he took on the role of director, writer, and the main star, and he does everything here really well. If you've seen a movie, A Ghost Story, I would recommend this movie to you if you like that movie. It came out after A Ghost Story, but close enough to where I would feel like these are companion pieces, not in the fact that the story is anywhere related, but for the fact of stylistically, these films feel very akin to each other. I definitely feel like Casey Affleck took a lot of influence from A Ghost Story into this movie, and if you like that kind of style and that aesthetic that A Ghost Story presents, I definitely think you'd like Light of My Life. Basically, the story is about a man and his daughter trying to survive a world where a disease ran rampant through women, killing off pretty much the entire female population on Earth, and he's got to try to protect her. It kind of feels very akin to something like Children of Men, but told on a much more somber note, and it is really well crafted. The cinematography is great, the performances are really good. The opening scene is like a 10 to like 15 minute scene of just Casey Affleck telling his daughter a story, and that's how you open the film, and it's very heartfelt and it's very emotional, and overall I really like this movie. Doesn't mean it's perfect, it doesn't mean it's something that I'm going to consider like a masterpiece, but it's definitely something I would come back to watch again. Another one I got with my Walmart gift card was Grave of Fireflies. Apparently because I hate myself. I am so tired of watching these super depressing movies, but it's really good. This is a movie that's been on my watch list for a long time. time. It's on IMDb's top 250, actually number 48 as I'm looking at IMDb right now. And it's always been considered a classic that I've always wanted to check out, and I finally did, and it's pretty great. But it is ultra depressing. Basically about a boy and his young sister trying to survive during World War II in Japan, and as you may assume, it's pretty heartbreaking throughout the entire film. It does a really great job of kind of balancing the horrors of war and how children have to survive through it and interpret it, the weight that certain family members have to carry during these times, and the uncertainty of tomorrow and what they need to survive. This is not a fun movie. This is a very brutal movie that has some really stunning and cutesy animation, but also some really horrifying animation, and overall it was not a pleasant viewing, but one that I would probably consider essential. I picked up some Nick Cage bullshit this month, and yeah, one of them I got was A Score to Settle. This was one that I was kind of interested in and saw it went on sale for $6.96 and decided to grab it. And this is probably one of the worst Nick Cage movies I've seen in a while. As anyone who is a fan of Nick Cage knows that he's basically doing just a bunch of straight-to-DVD movies at this point in his career, and sometimes you get some really hidden gems and sometimes you get some real garbage. But the one thing that I always really love about Nick Cage movies is you get a decent performance from Nick Cage. He's not like Steven Seagal or Bruce Willis where he just phones it in and doesn't care. Every time I've seen Nick Cage in a movie, Nick Cage cares. He's trying, he's having fun with it. And A Score to Settle is no different. A Score to Settle really kind of falls flat because of its story, weak action set pieces, poor direction, poor cinematography, and overall low budget feeling. But Nick Cage is there. We get some decent moments from Nick Cage overall. I think at this point everybody who watches Nick Cage wants to see some kind of zany freak out, and you get a little bit of that here, but the story and the film itself is just so uninteresting that it's just not really worth checking out. If you're a big fan of Nick Cage, maybe check it out, but other than that, I really don't care too much about this movie. I know I won't be revisiting it. If you want to see a really good Nick Cage movie, check out Caller Out of Space. So this next little lot I picked up from like a local exchange store where you can, trade in video games and movies and stuff for cash or store credit. And I check in there every once in a while with the malls being reopened and life kind of getting to this new normalcy. We went into the mall and I went into the store and found a few things, and one of those is a Nick Cage movie called Looking Glass for really cheap. This is a movie that I've been a little bit interested in since it came out. I really like the cover artwork. It's really well done, and it kind of looks like this neo-noir-y kind of story with Nick Cage. Basically, he and his wife buy a hotel and they can peek in on strangers a la Ken, Bad Times at the El Royale, and things go bad, and it's like a murder mystery. That sounds awesome. Sign me up. It's pretty okay. You get some really fun moments with Nicolas Cage in this movie for sure, but much like A Score to Settle, it's just kind of boring. This is definitely a lot more entertaining than A Score to Settle was. It does kind of present and have some good ideas here, but it also has some really flawed execution. This is by the same producers, I believe, as A Score to Settle. It's at least by the same production company, so you carry over a lot of the bad cinematography, editing, lighting, and that cheap feeling that this film has and A Score to Settle has. But this one has a better writer behind it. It does present some good ideas, but it doesn't feel all that interesting either. It kind of feels like a missed opportunity. And if I want to watch something like this, I'm probably just going to pop in Bad Times at the El Royale again because that movie is fantastic. Again, just go watch Caller Out of Space or Mandy or Joe or one of the other great, more recent Nick Cage films. This one is okay, but it's not anything special. Another one I found at that store is The Rescuers 2-pack. I really am trying to buy up all these old Disney animations that I grew up with, and The Rescuers was one that I never watched a lot of. I remember having the VHS to The Rescuers, but after rewatching it, I did remember a few characters, I remembered a few moments, but overall I really didn't remember much of this film, and I definitely didn't watch this one a ton as a kid. After rewatching it, it's pretty good. It's a solid kids movie. It has some decent animation and some decent moments. It's very short, being only 78 minutes, so it's a very quick watch, and it's pretty fun. It's decent. It's not one I'd consider probably a Disney classic, but I mean, that's basically it. A couple mice go try to hunt a girl who's been kidnapped, and that's kind of the weird part of this movie is there's like some really dark moments in this. It's basically about kidnapping and forced labor. It's really strange. of a story concept overall. Maybe that's why this one's not as revered as some of the other Disney films, but it's not bad. Now with that pack comes Rescuers Down Under, and this was one that I've never seen as a kid. This was the first time I ever got to watch this, and I really enjoyed this one. I like it better than the original, I would say, and that kind of seems to be the general consensus from what I can tell, especially from my social circle who have seen these movies. This isn't like Pocahontas 2 or, you know, Lilo and Stitch. I don't know if that's a good example, Lilo and Stitch 2, but where they make a sequel for straight to home video audience. This was actually a sequel that was greenlighted into theaters and unfortunately didn't do very well and made a bunch of the other sequels that they were probably going to release in theaters just go straight to home video. But this one is really good. It's basically a rinse and repeat of the first story, almost identical but set in Australia, so it's better. The main villain, McLeach, is great. Honestly, one of the better Disney villains I've seen. If I would put him on like a tier list, he would be up there with like almost Scar in my opinion, because he's just that good of a villain. The animation is very crisp and very good. It definitely doesn't have that old retro animation style that I personally love like the first Rescuers do, but it has some really good, and it was kind of the first all CGI rendered animation film of its time, and it holds up really well. Overall too, I kind of felt like the pacing was just a bit better in this film. It was a lot more fast paced with a lot better comedic timing, and overall just kind of a more enjoyable story. I definitely would probably watch this one again over the first one. The last thing I picked up at that store was Legend from 1985 from Ridley Scott with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry, and I loved this movie. This is a movie that's been on my watch list for quite a while, but was never one that I really wanted to go out of my way to get. And I came across it for a really good price, and so I just went ahead and jumped on it. And after watching it, I loved this movie. This movie was great. Now, with that being said, from my understanding, there is a huge difference in the director's cut as opposed to the theatrical cut. The edition I got, the Ultimate Edition, came with both theatrical and the director's cut. We watched the director's cut. I've not seen the theatrical cut, and I really liked it. It is a very high fantasy style movie that's covered in glitter from head to toe. Tom Cruise spouts off some really goofy and corny lines, and overall this film is very corny and goofy, but in a very fun and adventurous way. It never came off as taking itself very seriously, but rather just trying to be a really fun high fantasy movie. The cinematography is stunning in this. This was Ridley Scott's follow-up to Blade Runner, and honestly, it's not as great as Blade Runner when it comes to the visual side of things, but the production of this movie is unreal. The cinematography and the costume designs, the production design to this movie is phenomenal from head to toe. Makeup, wardrobe, sets, everything in this movie was incredibly well done. Hands down the best part of the entire movie, and had some really stunning and beautiful imagery throughout the entire film. Tim Curry chews this film up. He is so much fun when he finally comes on screen. He's in very small amount of this movie, unfortunately, but he is a ton of fun when he is there. You have these cast of knockoff hobbits and stuff that kind of follow around in this film, and they're just comic relief characters that are kind of just doofy and honestly kind of fun. There was multiple times where I legitimately was laughing at this movie unironically, and overall I just really enjoyed this film. To me, this was just a really fun fantasy film that was corny, goofy. I had a blast watching it. I picked up The Call with Halle Berry. Now, this might be a weird pickup in general, but I found it for $3.74 at Walmart in the Blu-ray bin. When we went and scanned it, it ended up being $5, but we just went ahead and got it because this is honestly a pretty underrated movie in my opinion. It's basically about a 911 operator who gets a call about a girl being kidnapped, and she's got to try to help save this girl. You do kind of have to spin your suspension of disbelief as the film moves on. It kind of loses grounded roots, but from what I remember, and I haven't seen this movie in a while, this was a really kind of decent, tight thriller that had a solid script and honestly one of the better performances I've ever seen from Halle Berry. She's not an actress that I really care all that much about. I've not seen very much from her that has sold me on her being like a great actress or anything, but this was a really decent and fun one for sure. I don't know if I'm ever going to rewatch it anytime soon. I know Autumn seems interested in checking it out, so maybe I'll rewatch it, and I don't know if my opinions will change on it, but I remember at the time thinking that this was a pretty good and suspenseful thriller that hopefully holds up. And one of the last things I got in May that actually came in on time was Long Way North. And yes, I have seen every movie this month. For the first time, I've watched every movie that's in this haul. This is a French animation about a Russian girl and set in the 1800s who goes on an adventure to find out what happened to her grandfather and try to save her family's reputation. And the animation to this movie is absolutely stunning. I ended up picking this up because I had some reward points back on Amazon and decided to go ahead and order it. It's something that I've had my eye on for a little while, and I finally just pulled the trigger on it, and it's really good. It's a really short film coming in at only 81 minutes. But like I said, the animation is really pretty. It's just kind of different painted style animation that works really well. Sasha is a really well written character, and you just kind of follow her along as she tries to find out what happened to her grandpa. And it's a very captivating story because this girl kind of comes into her own. It's almost kind of like a coming of age story mixed in with this kind of epic adventure. And there are some really epic moments. There are some really heart pounding moments, some really sad moments, but also some really happy moments. And overall, it's a pretty solid animation that I would recommend. And yeah, that's everything I picked up in May. I definitely have some cool stuff coming in, so I hope you guys will check out the June one next month. I hope you guys are staying safe, be kind to one another, and I will see you later.